I will never cut my hair. When I was a little girl, I would have my hair cut with scissors. A girl once said that I looked as though someone had used a bottle to shave my head. That is when I was disqualified from the Beauty Olympics. Growing up, I knew I was brilliant because despite having started school a year later than my classmates, I was already at the top of my class by the time I was in class 1. The worst incident that ever happened was when we were in a Kiswahili class and we were studying parts of the body. And our teacher told us to touch a part of our body or that of our classmate whenever we came across that part of the body in the book. It was a classroom of 100 pupils. And suddenly, that moment that was very innocent turned chaotic. We came across a bald head in the book, and all the children bounced off their desks. And they hit my head as they laughed. I covered my head with my hands and I begged them to stop. But they wouldn't. And when the excitement had died down, the class just went on like nothing had happened. The teacher never even asked if I was okay. Was I not brilliant? I wondered. And from then on, it was very difficult for me to trust older women because I believed they always had a plan at the back of their mind. And so I decided that I had to be the best student, get the best grades so that people would like me. Because you see, when I grew up, because of the pressure I was getting, I believed that for you to be successful, you need to get an A, go to a national school, get married, have children, and make sure you're a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer. I even wanted to be the top student in the Kenya Certificate of Primary Education, and so I read as hard as I could. In 2009, I scored 407 in the Kenya Certificate of Primary Education. And I wanted to go to a national school. And then the government decided to call me to Naivasha Girls Secondary School. And I was heartbroken. And so I had to work for a year again in Form 1, keeping my grades nothing below an A- just to join a national school. And through God's grace, when I was in Form 2, I was admitted to the Great Alliance Girls High School. I was excited. I remember the day I walked into the gate, I was surprised. I had never seen a school that was so big. And Baba Esther, the watchman, welcomed me as he said, "Karibu, daughter." And I knew, finally, I'm going to be that student who scores an A, is in the best school, will become a doctor, an engineer, and a lawyer. I was in Alliance. What else? Until I had to do my first exam. Ladies and gentlemen, I made it to the bottom of my class. For the first time in my life, I was struggling with my academics. And that's when my feelings of insignificance growing up began to show up. I wanted to be noticed for being good in class, and here I was, now failing. It's all A's, nothing but A's, all the time. And here I was, now scoring all C's, all D's, all E's, all the time. Eventually in Form 3, I gave up. And when I felt like my prayers were not reaching the heavens, I decided to go and see the Christian Union patron. And I told him about my life story, growing up feeling insignificant. And he told me, "Cynthia, I think you need more than prayers." And I don't think I'm the right person to help you, so I'll talk to someone who will. I'll talk to the deputy principal. I'll tell her about you. Make sure you go talk to her. And so a term later, I walked to the administration building, not because I wanted to get an A, but more so because I was desperate and I was afraid of failure. And as I walked to the administration building, something kept telling me, Cynthia, why are you going to the administration building? Only the beautiful, excellent, popular girls go talk to the deputy principal and the principal. And I gained the courage and I knocked at her door. She opened it, she smiled at me, she welcomed me and told me to sit down. Talk to me, she said. I sat in her office for 5 hours, narrating my story, describing that incident that had happened when I was younger. And when I was done, she looked at me and asked me what my dreams were. I was 16. She listened. She gave me hope. She turned to her cupboard and she got out a book. It was beautiful, with beautiful photos. Life Journeys, Conversations with High-Achieving Women in Kenya, highlighting the stories of successful women in Kenya by Susan Githuku. She told me to read the book, and she told me I could read it anytime I wanted. She even helped me to come up with a study plan. And later on, she challenged me to go meet the women in the book. At the tail end of my high school education, my grades began to improve. And when I did my Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education, I scored an A-. I was happy. I had done well. But society kept telling me, you've not done well. I was not the girl who was being shown off in the media. No journalist was asking me what I wanted to be when I grew up. What is an A- anyway? When I joined the University of Nairobi School of Law and the pressure of getting an A had died down, I began to reflect about the women in the book. And so I began to look for them, writing to them, asking them on social media if I could meet them. And some of them eventually became my mentors. And in 2015, I was speaking to one of my mentors, and I was telling her about the challenges that young people in my home county were facing. This included lack of skills, lack of opportunities, lack of education. And I was telling her, you're very influential and very powerful. Why don't you go and help the women and the young people in my county? And she told me, Cynthia, you know, years ago, I interviewed the late Professor Wangari Maathai, and I asked her, what will you do for your country? And she told me, don't ask me what I will do. Ask yourself that question. And so my mentor posed the same challenge to me. And she told me, don't be afraid to start small. And so with determination and hope, I began to write to different organizations. And eventually, Equity Bank gave me a listening ear. And when I went to their offices in Upper Hill, I talked to them about the challenges young people were going through. And they asked me to be a volunteer mentor with the Equity Wings to Fly program. That is when my life as a volunteer began. And so a day at a time, I began to give a little bit of my time, even if it meant covering books for someone who was donating them to our school. I was determined and I was hopeful. In 2016, I participated in the World Bank Blog for Development competition. And the theme of that year was, what opportunities would you create for young people in your country? And because I'd greatly benefited from mentorship spaces, I wrote about mentorship for young people. I was shortlisted as one of the top 10, out of 800 submissions. And I told myself, this is it. This is meant for you. You'll be the number one in this interview. You'll go to Washington, D.C., and everyone will know you. You see, growing up, I'd put so much pressure on myself. I had to be more than enough just to be enough. And then I didn't win. And I thought it was the end of the world. For real, I was convinced it was the end of the world. A few weeks later, one of the ladies who interviewed me called me and asked me to have lunch with her. And I couldn't understand. Why does she want to have lunch with someone who didn't win? Anyway, I went to the World Bank office. Anyway, who doesn't like free lunch? So I went. And as I sat down, she told me, I already saw the potential in you when you were doing that interview, even if you did not win. Again, here was someone else believing in me. And she asked me what my dreams were. She asked me. And she challenged me to start a brand that would influence the lives of young people in Kenya. And I sat down and I asked myself the skills that I had. And I thought I could write. And that's when I began CynthiaUntamed.com, a brand and a blog that highlights the stories of young Africans like me who are positively impacting their communities, but they do not have the space to tell that story. Untamed means young, resilient, hopeful, and determined to dream big and to hope deeply. CynthiaUntamed.com began to create opportunities for young people in a way that I had never imagined. For example, I once wrote the story of a girl who used that same story to apply to be a prefect in her school. She got it. Later on, she used the same story to apply to the African Leadership Academy. She got in. I believed in that, and I began to see what I could do beyond what I was scoring in class. Cynthia Untamed enabled me to fly for the first time in my life through State House, Kenya. I flew to the port of Mombasa to write about the developments going on there. You see, for me, before that, I believed opportunities that come from places like State House only belong to the beautiful, excellent girls, and I was none of those. And later on, Cynthia Untamed enabled me to fly to Johannesburg, South Africa, for the first time in my life, to represent Kenya in the launch of a youth report. And with hope and determination, I kept writing, and I kept believing. And because of CynthiaUntamed.com, I got my first job as a youth advocate for communication and advocacy at UNICEF Kenya. Here's what I've learned. My mentor told me that as long as you have put your best foot forward, you need to leave the rest to God. I have also learned that I am enough. I do not need to prove anything to anyone as long as I believe in what I do. Here is something else that I've learned. That as young people, our system has changed. We need to look at ourselves beyond what we are scoring. And our parents need to see us for who we are beyond what we get in class and the careers we get into. They need to see us beyond the doctors and the engineers and the lawyers. For young people, you need to challenge yourself to get skills beyond what you studied in class. For example, I studied law, but I've had to learn how to take pictures and how to work in a communication space. That is what I have learned. And finally, I have learned to trust in the God who believes in me more than anyone. At UNICEF Kenya, I work with children and young people, and sometimes they ask me, how did you get here? You see, some time back, they were tasked to speak to the Minister of Education then, Ambassador Amina Mohammed, and they were to ask her questions about children and youth. And they were afraid. And I just told them, you can do it, you are brave, you are smart, and you are brilliant. You just need to believe in yourself. You are enough. I just showed them what is possible. I show them what a confident girl and a confident person can do beyond what they score in class. I show them what is possible every day. Because I can make a difference.